Mr. Papillion, tell me the definition of a motion in limine.
Motion in limine, in some law books it doesn't exist, Senator, but what it is it is a motion filed in advance of trial to get a ruling in limine, which means in advance of some issue that may come up in the trial, usually an evidentiary issue.
Thought you might know.
Thank you.
Judge Hurson, explain to me the various definitions that the U.S. Supreme Court has used to define a fundamental right.
In Glucksberg, and even recently in Dobbs, the Supreme Court has really focused on two major issues. One, whether the right in question is deeply rooted in our history and tradition. And the court has also focused on whether it is implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. And I also believe that in Glucksberg, they describe the need for the right to be clearly defined.
Welcome back to the channel. Today, Senator John Kennedy grills nominees Papillion, Hurson, and Daniel. His questions are sharp. Stick around. It gets intense.
What's a motion in limine?
He pauses, then he tells me,
Well, Senator, it's a motion filed before trial to get a ruling on an evidentiary issue. The word limine means at the threshold.
And he did. Simple, straight, no fluff.
Then I turn to Judge Hurson. Judge, can you walk me through how the U.S. Supreme Court defines a fundamental right?
He's ready for this one. He starts by referencing Glucksberg and Dobbs.
The court looks at whether the right is deeply rooted in our history and tradition, and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty.
Hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel grow, and you won't miss any of these sharp Senate exchanges.
How does that relate to the discussion in Griswold of a penumbra?
Well, obviously, Griswold, as you state, points out this concept of the penumbra, rights that are not explicitly enumerated, but that the court has otherwise found. As a sitting magistrate judge, and if I was fortunate to become a district judge, I would, of course, follow the guidance of the Supreme Court, who has identified just a few, relatively small number of those rights. Obviously, the right to privacy, perhaps being the most well-known.
Now I keep the pressure on. I ask Hurson, does a fundamental right to be rooted in our history and tradition?
He brings up Heller, McDonald, and Bruen. Says the court treated those cases like historical essays. In the Second Amendment context, history was everything, but he admits not all rights go through that historical lens. Marriage, for instance, has been treated differently.
Judge Hurson makes an interesting point.
Well, can you have, what has the Supreme Court said about the existence of a fundamental right that is not part of our history and tradition? For example, when the court delved into the Second Amendment, it was really, the opinions were almost written as if they were historians as opposed to judges, but part of our history and tradition was a fundamental part of their discussion. Does the right have to be part of our history and tradition, be fundamental?
Well, I can say this, that in Heller, McDonald, and Bruen, that was the focus. That's what the court looked at. Now, there are other cases throughout history that have recognized a few other rights, the right to marry, for example. And I can't speak to the specific methodology that was used, but I will say, at least in the Second Amendment context, that focus on history was critically important.
Okay, all right.
Time to switch gears. Tell me, I ask, if I'm walking down the street, can a police officer just stop and talk to me? What if I don't?
Then he explains, the officer needs of a crime. They have to justify the stop.
So I hit him with a curveball. Why can police set up a roadblock and stop 500 people just to check insurance?
He admits it is, but again, says he hasn't researched that specific issue.
If I'm walking down the street and a police officer wants to stop and talk to me, can he just stop and talk to me for any reason?
Senator, you can seek your consent to stop and talk to you.
What if I don't consent?
If you don't consent, then the officer needs to have a reasonable articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed, will be committed, and be able to articulate that to justify the stop.
Okay. Then how come police officers can set up a roadblock and stop 500 people to see if they have liability insurance?
My understanding is that the Supreme Court has ruled that those types of stops, when generally applied, are conducive to good order and policing.
Why? They're still stops, aren't they?
Senator, in my 8.5 years as a prosecutor, I've not had to litigate the adequacy.
I know. I'm just asking you what you think. I mean, isn't that pretty intrusive? What if I'm in a hurry to pick up my kid from school and I don't have time to wait for 10 minutes and I don't want to wait anyway? Why? If a cop can't just stop me on the street, why can they stop me and check my insurance?
Senator, as far as my personal belief, I haven't encountered that.
I'm just asking you legally, why can they do that?
Again, I haven't encountered that issue, so I don't have the research on that, Senator.
Let's be honest. Most of us have hit one of those checkpoints. We're late, we're tired, we just want to get home, and we're getting stopped for no crime. It's a fair question. So there you have it. 3 nominees, 3 different legal minds, and 1 senator who doesn't pull punches. From motions in limine to fundamental rights, this hearing had everything. Subscribe for more behind-the-scenes insight into Capitol Hill. I'll see you in the next one.